This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, now let's talk about some basic accounting entries in accounts payable and receivable first. Let me write accounts payable and here I'll write accounts receivable. Before we start configuring accounts payable and accounts receivable, first let us try to understand what financial entries will come from AP and AR. So accordingly, you will understand what we are going to do from this and how you will have to prepare your configuration things and all. So first thing, when we talk about accounts payable, keep in your mind it is all about your vendors. Accounts payable is all about vendors. Your accounts receivable is all about customers. You should always try to understand accounts payable and accounts receivable together because these two are quite opposite. Okay, accounts payable, if you understand, automatically you will understand accounts receivable because it's quite opposite of it. In accounts payable, you are going to deal with vendors. In short, any transaction that you find with a vendor or anywhere you find the term called vendor, it is straight away related to accounts payable. Similarly, anything that you find with customers, it is straight away related to accounts receivable. Right? So from vendors, whatever the transactions that we are going to do, from customers, whatever the transactions that we are going to do, we have to have at least the basic understanding before we start configuring AP and AR. Now, from accounts payable, normally the data flow in your SAP FICO is, what is the data flow? What is going to happen? First thing is your business requirement. Based on the business requirement, what we are going to do, we are going to do the configuration. Let's put config. Based on the configuration, master data is created. Based on master data, we are going to create transaction data. Based on the transaction data, we are going to generate reports. Typically, this is what the data flow in your SAP FICO when it comes to any business process. First thing you'll have to understand is business requirement. What is the business requirement or what is the existing business process? Based on that business process understanding, you are going to start the configuration. Okay, once you do the configuration, once the config is completed, you are going to create master records. With the help of master records, you are going to create transactions. Once masters and transactions are created, you will be able to generate reports related to masters, reports related to transactions. So in short, before we understand how accounts payable is configured or how accounts receivable is configured, it is very important for us to understand these three parts first. Okay, master data, transaction data and reports. What kind of master records will be created for vendor and customer? What kind of entries are posted in vendor and customer? What kind of reports we generate for vendor and customer? So in vendor, when we talk about master data, what masters are we going to create in vendor? In vendor, it will be vendor master data. Am I correct? In vendor, you are going to create vendor master data. So let me put here vendor. Let me also put BP. BP vendor master data, business partner vendor master data. On the other side, for your accounts receivable, you are going to create BP customer master data. In AP, you are going to have business partner vendor. In AR, you are going to have business partner customer. Similarly, when it comes to transactions, what kind of a transactions are we going to perform for the vendor? First thing, you are going to perform purchase invoices. You will be receiving purchase invoices from the vendor, and purchase invoices will be created. Next one, credit memos will be created. Next one, advance payments will be created. Next one, payments will be created. Any other transaction? Basic business process transactions from vendor. This is what we are going to do. Similarly, from the customer point of view, you are going to create sales invoice. Next, credit memos. Credit memo is nothing but returns. If you're talking about customer credit memo, it's a customer return. If you're talking about vendor credit memo, this is your vendor return. Advance payment and payment is common in both these two. Advance payment and normal payment are common in both AP and AR. Now, when we know this is the sequence, this is the process flow that is followed in every organization for AP and AR. First, how your master data is created. In an organization, if somebody wants to create a new vendor, is it like just like that they'll go to vendor master data creation screen, they'll start typing the vendor name address, or there will be any process for it? Anybody who worked on
Vendor
AP?
registration form.
Configuration will be there.
To create a new vendor, there will be something called a new vendor request form or new vendor approval form. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? There will be a new vendor approval form. This new vendor approval form will have to be filled up by the purchasing team, ensuring that the name, address, all the information related to the vendor is updated there. And this new vendor approval form is supposed to be given along with a valid purchase request or along with a valid purchase order, or a valid invoice must be submitted to the accounting or to the master data department. Once they receive this request, they are going to review the request, whatever the new vendor approval form is created. They will verify whether this request is approved by the management or not. Any new vendor request that you get will have to be approved by the management. Whoever is the authorized person will have to approve, yes, okay to create this as a new vendor or a new supplier. Once that is approved, only then a new vendor account is going to be created. Right? It is not like that, just like that they will create a vendor the way you practice in your learning situations. So the way you learn, the way you create a vendor is different. In this, the way the vendor is created in a real environment is different. So you have to understand how a new vendor is created, because you might get these kind of questions also in your interview. If somebody is asking you how a new vendor account is created, so they are not going to ask how a new vendor account is created from SAP point of view. They are going to ask from the business point of view. So you'll have to tell new vendor approval or request form is created, and this form will be approved by the somebody, and based on this master data team is going to create the vendor. And if you showcase or if you inform somebody that you have an experience in SAP FICO, and if you are asked a question how a new vendor is created in system, if you are straight away telling go to business partner or BPT code FK01 XK01 transaction code, it clearly represents we have not worked on SAP FICO. Right? The way we answer will reveal what kind of knowledge, what kind of experience we have, because nobody is going to validate, nobody is going to verify your configuration knowledge. Keep this point at all times in your mind. Okay, the way you talk should represent that you are talking from the business point of view. That is what is needed for somebody to verify that you have good knowledge. Once the new vendor account is created, then we are good to go with the business transactions of the vendor. Let's say you purchased something from a vendor, and when you did any purchase, you will receive the vendor invoice. To create that vendor invoice, you will have some transaction codes. So you will go to the vendor invoice creation screen. You will be updating that vendor information and the purchase related information. So when you are passing vendor invoices or purchase invoices, what will be the accounting entry for it? We talk about purchase invoices. What will be the accounting entry for purchase invoices?
Purchase account data to
Here,
vendor account.
Purchase account debit to vendor.
right. Here we are not talking about integration related to MM. Here we are only talking about accounts payable from finance point of view. Okay, here it will be your purchase account debit, vendor account credit. When we talk about purchase account debit and when we talk about vendor account credit, we have to understand, is this how exactly we are going to write the entry when you are posting an invoice, or some changes will be there? When you write this entry, there will be slight changes. Instead of purchase account, you are going to write so instead of purchase account, which account we are going to write? Expense account you are going to write. You are going to debit expense account and you are going to put vendor account. So when you talk about vendor, you are going to put name of the vendor here. Is this clear? The reason why I am writing in brackets, because I don't want anybody to create a GL account with the description as purchase. Because with the description of purchase, we don't create any GL account when you are in any project. There will be no GL account called purchase. You have to specify what purchase it is. When you're talking about purchase, you have two type of expenses, because purchase is all about expense. You have capital expenditure, you have revenue expenditure or operating expense. In short, capex and opex. If your purchase is related to capex, you are going to debit asset account. If your purchase is related to opex, you are going to debit P&L expense account. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Purchase expense is of two types. One is capex, two is opex. Now capex is all about fixed asset procurement or purchases. When it comes to opex, it's all about operating expenses, in short P&L expenses. You know what things will come in P&L, right? Your freight, anything. Okay, so that is your P&L expenses. Here we are not writing third kind of expense under capex. In short, under balance sheet there will be one more expense called inventory. Okay, you will be purchasing stock also. Anything related to inventory is not taken in finance related accounts payable. This will be taken in logistics related accounts payable, in short MM module. So that is where we bring a topic called FIMM integration, which we will be discussing in the upcoming sessions. In detail, we will configure basic MM module. We will create POs and all. We will check how data flow happens between FI and MM. But before that, we have to understand finance point of view, what is accounts payable. These are the 2 points that you'll have to remember when you're talking about purchase account debit. Okay, capex and opex. And when you write the accounting entry, instead of purchase, you are going to replace either with capex account or the opex account. Let's say if you purchased furniture, you are going to debit furniture account. If you purchased any Stationary items, you are going to debit stationary items. Similarly, if you purchased from ABC Limited, instead of vendor credit, you are going to put ABC Limited credit. Clear? How we are going to pass the accounting entries? Right from the beginning of your initial entry in the accounts payable, make sure you are going to pass the entries in a right way. You are going to understand accounts payable in a proper way. Next one, credit memos. When we talk about credit memos, what will be the accounting entry for credit memo? In short, credit memo is nothing but an adjustment in the vendor account. Normally, your vendor account will show a debit balance or a credit balance.
Credit. Credit.
Your vendor account will show credit balance. Sometimes you may have to pass some adjustments to reduce your liability. Sometimes you may have to perform some adjustments to reduce the vendor liability, which means you need to reduce that credit balance. To reduce the credit balance, you'll have to put a debit balance. These vendor debits, in terms of any adjustment in the vendor account, are called as your vendor credit memos. Option number 1, this can be a written. Option number 2, this can be any adjustment to reduce the vendor liability. For these things, what you are going to do, you are going to do the same thing. Same thing we will be doing, but the only change is what will happen. It will be reverse. Vendor account will be on the debit side and expense account will be on the credit side. Correct? If you know the accounting entry for invoice, for credit memo, it is the ulta of, or it is the reverse of your vendor invoice. Whatever the entry is posted at the time of invoice, this entry will be posted reverse for a credit memo, because credit memo is nothing but adjustment. You are reducing the value. Third one is your advance payment. Third one is your advance payment. How advance payment is made? What is advance payment first? What is advance payment?
Which we paid in advance to customer. Oh, vendor.
Right? Any payment that you are making to the vendor before receiving any benefit, which means before receiving the product, before receiving the service, if you are making the payment, that is called as your advance payment or down payment. Whenever this advance payment or down payment is made, we have to ensure this down payment or advance payment is appearing separately. Normally, what will happen whenever you purchase from a vendor, your vendor account shows a credit balance, which means your vendor account is representing a liability. Am I correct? Normally, transactions that are posted in your vendor account will represent liability nature. But when you pass any advance in the vendor account, this will represent, or this will reflect as a positive number or a debit balance, which represents as an asset, current asset. Current asset means what? Something receivable. Correct? Current asset means something receivable. You made a payment to a vendor, but you did not receive anything. Are we supposed to receive something from vendor once we make the advance payment? Yes, no?
Yes.
Right? You made a payment, let's say, of some 10,000. This 10,000 rupees worth material or any product or any service is something that you'll have to receive from the vendor. Until you receive the amount that you have paid for the vendor, you are going to show this advance as a separate account. Okay, all the transactions of your vendor will be represented in one account, which is the liability, and all the accounts, all the transactions related to your down payments or advances will be represented in another account, which will represent the positive number or asset balance. So one vendor account will have two GL accounts connected. One GL account representing normal transactions of the vendor, other GL account representing special transactions of a vendor. Special transaction is nothing but advances. Okay, advance payment. So This is a special GL transaction in SAP. Advance payment is special GL transaction in SAP. When we make the advance payment, what will be the accounting entry?
Vendor down payment debit to customer.
So it will be vendor account debit and bank outgoing credit. Is this correct? You will have to debit the vendor account and you have to credit the bank account. When you're talking about bank account, from accounts payable, from accounts receivable point of view, always make sure you use bank sub accounts. Once we understand this, we will be discussing about house banks. Okay, so you will be using bank outgoing account as credit. Next one is your normal vendor payment. What is the accounting entry for this? Now, this is a normal GL transactions. This is a normal GL transaction in SAP. Even though if it is normal GL transaction or a special GL transaction, your accounting entry is going to remain same, because end of the day it's a payment. Either you are making in the name of advance or in the name of final settlement or normal payment, your vendor is going to receive, your bank account is going to send. So they debit the receiver vendor account, credit what goes out your bank account. Accounting entry will not get changed in terms of your vendor down payment or in terms of your vendor normal payment. Clear? Now, credit memo. Credit memo is also part of normal transaction. Purchase invoice is also normal transaction. In short, out of 4, how many normal transactions and how many special transactions we have written?
One special transaction.
One special GL transaction, 3 normal GL transaction. In short, advance is always treated as special GL transaction in SAP, both for vendor and for customer. Apart from advance, everything is a normal GL transaction. Clear? Apart from advances, everything is a normal GL transaction, and every vendor account will have 2 reconciliation accounts. Let me write. Every vendor contains 2 reconciliation GL accounts. One to update normal transactions and other one to update special transactions. Any doubt in this? Your vendor account contains two GL accounts, one to update normal transactions, the other one is to update special GL transactions. Your normal transactions are vendor invoice, vendor credit memo, vendor payment. Your special GL transaction is vendor advances. Clear with this? Any confusion? Any questions on this?
Yes, sir. Reconciliation account. Only subledger balance is transferred to GL. That purpose we are using for reconciliation. It is correct.
Correct. Any other questions, anyone?
Sir, we will
On
create
this?
two GLs separately.
These two GLs are separate, correct. Okay. Now let's try to write these things in the customer account. Normally, whenever you're talking about any customer, are we going to create customer account just like that, or for customer creation also there will be approval process, request approval process, same like vendor?
Same like vendor.
Right? It will be this similar to vendor. The way you are creating a vendor without the approval, sorry, with approval, in the similar way your customer account is also created with approval. New customer approval form will be there. The salesperson or the salesman, the sales department, somebody will identify the customer that who is going to purchase items from you. They will create that customer account details in an application form, and they will submit the supporting documentation, that customer address, customer bank account details and all, every information will be given, because this is going to be a legal transaction. You need customer identification proofs, everything is needed. It's not that you just like get sold to a customer, you have given a credit period of 1 month, and after purchasing from you, customer disappeared, and it will be a loss, right? You have to collect the amount from the customer. To collect the amount from the customer, you have to ensure the genuinity of the customer. Lot of things will be there, and all these points we have to understand, because tomorrow when you are in a project, all these points is what your end user is going to talk with you. Currently this is what we are doing, and how this can be done in SAP. Different questions they'll put in front of you. First of all, before you answer all those questions, we need to understand what they are talking about. Right? They will talk about accounts payable only, but in a different way, because they do not know SAP. They cannot talk about account group, reconciliation account, tolerance group. They will not be talking about all this. This is consulting specific terminology to ensure that accounts payable or receivable is configured in system. But from business point of view, you will have to think from a different aspect. Right? Assuming the customer approval form is created and it is approved, and you have created the new customer. Once a new customer is created, let's say you have made a sale to the customer. Whenever you make any sale to the customer, there will be a financial impact or accounting impact. What will be the accounting impact for sales invoice?
Customer to
Right, what is that accounting entry?
customer debit
Customer
to
debit,
Customer account debit, and then
sales revenue credit.
sales account credit. Here we will be using sales as usual, sales only, but we don't use purchase as purchase, but sales will be used as a sales only. Okay. Now once you made the sale, let's say you want to adjust something in the customer account, and how your customer credit memo is posted. What will be the accounting entry for customer credit memo?
sales debit to customer.
So always remember, your credit memo entry is always reversal of your invoice. Okay, here you will be debiting the sales account and customer account will be credited. Is this correct? And when it comes to advance payment from a customer, what will be the accounting entry?
Bank incoming account debit to customer.
Bank incoming account debit and customer will be credit. This will be the accounting entry when you make any advance payment. Now here also same thing. If your customer account shows a debit balance, your customer advance account will show a credit balance because we are liable to supply to the customer. Correct? You collected money but you have not supplied anything to the customer. So until you supply the material or whatever the service to the customer, you are going to show your advance as a liability. You are going to show your advance as a liability. Remember, whenever you talk about liability, you are talking about a credit balance. Is that correct? Liability always shows credit balance. Asset always shows debit balance. Now, after the advance payment, let's say you have payment. For the payment, what will be the accounting entry?
The same.
It will be the same. Whether it is advance payment or it is a normal payment, your financial entry will not be changed. It will be the same. It is only from the business point of view to segregate. This is the payment against what we have already supplied to the customer. This is payment against what we are about to supply or what we are agreed to supply to the customer. Now, when you talk about this nature of a transaction, okay. Now, sales invoice is a normal GL transaction in SAP. Is this correct? Credit memo is also a normal GL transaction, and where is it? One sec. And advance payment is a special GL transaction in SAP. Correct? Next, your payment is normal GL transaction. Copy this and put this here. Now, if you read only this accounts receivable portion, your customer sales invoice is a normal GL transaction. Your customer credit memo is a normal GL transaction. Customer advance payment is a special GL transaction. Customer payment is a normal GL transaction. Is this flow correct? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
But this flow is what you have to understand from the basic accounts payable and from the basic accounts receivable point of view, because initially we are going to configure basic accounts payable, basic accounts receivable to perform these postings. Once we are clear with these postings, we will be getting into different scenarios in accounts payable and in accounts receivable, like your discount, taxes, payment terms, all these kind of things we are going to deal with your accounts payable and receivable. Practically whatever the possible scenarios that you get, all these kind of things we will be understanding in a separate scenario based sessions, right? So we are not supposed to club everything in one go. That will lead to unnecessary confusions. First, we have to be very clear with basic version of AP and AR. Then we will add. If I am selling to a customer, what if I give a discount? How my discounts are treated? Possible that you will be giving discount to the customer? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
If you give a discount to the customer, this discount is treated as expense or income. Discount that is given to the customer, is it an expense or income?
Expenses.
Discount that is given to the customer is an expense. Now, how discount account is going to come? Are we going to write manually discount account while booking the invoice?
We will create GL now.
No, while booking the invoice, your discount will come, or when will discount come into the picture? What is the data flow of your discount?
Like
When
based
we are
on the
paying
payment terms, it will
payment,
come.
when we are paying, sir.
When we are paying, your discount is going to come. But
Yes.
is this coming just like that while making the payment or based on any condition? What is the prerequisite?
Payment term sheet is the fee request.
Payment terms to
We
be
have to
assigned
create
in the
GL.
payment document.
Yes.
Where are we going to assign payment terms, in the invoice or in the payment?
In BP, we are going to assign the
In
payment
invoice,
terms.
we will assign payment terms.
Both.
Right. In the invoice, your payment terms must be there.
Yes.
Right? If your invoice document contains payment terms, based on the payment terms, the system will calculate a baseline date. Based on the payment terms, the system will calculate baseline date. From this baseline date, it will apply the number of days that are eligible for discount. Let's say if your discount is eligible for 30 days, from baseline date, it will calculate next 30 days. Until that 30th day, system is going to treat that you are eligible for discount. Now, when you are making any payment, system is going to calculate the due date. System is going to calculate the due date, normal due date, and the discount due date. So based on the discount due date, or in short, if you are making the payment within the discount due date, you are eligible to get the discount. So this discount eligibility or whatever is verified, is validated at the time of payment transaction. When you are making the payment, you are going to select payment against an invoice. Correct? Whenever you make any payment or whenever you receive any payment, you are going to receive the payment against an invoice. Yes, no?
Yes.
Just like that, we are not going to receive the payment. Either you are making or you are receiving. The concept remains the same, but one side you call it as accounts payable and the other side we are calling it as accounts receivable. When you are making any payment, you are making payment against an invoice, an existing or against a valid invoice. If you are making the payment, you do not have any invoice, there are two options. Option number one, that is called as advance payment. Option number two, that is called as on account payment. Okay, you have to understand what is payment against invoice, what is payment against on account, what is payment against a down payment or advance. Right? Now there is something called payment application or cash application. Any idea what is this? You have something called
It's a
payment
cash
application.
application.
Like cash and else.
The cash application using for apply the amount against the open invoice.
Correct. So whenever we are talking about cash applications or payment applications, we are talking about applying this payment to a valid document, because you are receiving payment against any outstanding invoice. So when you receive the payment, you have to identify the respective invoice and then apply this payment to the invoice so that your invoice will get cleared from the outstanding list. Is that correct? When you are applying the payment against a valid open or outstanding invoice, that invoice will become cleared. Now, how you are going to know that when you receive a payment or when you make a payment, this payment is against this invoices? How do you know that this payment is received for these invoices? Who is going to tell that information?
Against every opening
So we will
balance, you can.
download the checks manual logbook.
No. Whenever any payment is made, either to a customer or to a vendor, okay, whenever any payment document is made, this is applicable for both AP and AR. Whenever a payment is made, your payment should always contain the supporting documentation. Just like that, you are not supposed to make the payment. Your payment should always contain the supporting document. The payment supporting document is always your payment advice. Is that correct? Whenever you make the payment, along with the payment, you have to give the payment advice. This payment advice talks about the details about the payment amount. Let's say you have transferred some 10,000 rupees to a vendor. Now your vendor must know why I received this 10,000. So along with that payment, you are going to issue a payment advice to the vendor, which talks about we are issuing the payment of 10,000 against the below invoices. You will have to give the invoice references in the payment advice, so that your vendor will understand, okay, against these invoices I have received a payment. Accordingly, they will adjust your outstandings, because periodically, very frequently, you will be receiving statements from your vendor. You will be sending statements to your customer, right? Same like if you have a credit card, you are going to receive the credit card statement every month,
Yes.
right? In the similar way, if you have a vendor, you are going to receive statement from your vendor periodically, maybe once in a month or once in every 2 weeks. Likewise, they will be sending, notifying you about the outstanding invoices that are to be settled. They might put, this is the invoice number, this is the purchase date, this is the due date, this is the amount. So far we have not received any payment. They will be giving you this vendor statements. Similarly, you will be giving these kind of vendor statements to the customer. Now, how these vendor statements are prepared, how these customer statements are prepared, is something that we will be understanding as a correspondence topic. There is something called vendor correspondence, there is something called customer correspondence, or vendor account statement, customer account statement. How these account statements are prepared in SAP. Okay, so these points we will have to slowly understand, but to understand all these points, whatever we have written on the screen now is the base, because everything is connected to these points only. If you understand this, adding the other functionalities in AP and AR is very simple.
I just sorry to disturb you, but in customer side, the advance payment is also special GL.
Yes,
But I
special
think
GL.
are intended normal.
Right, I think I pasted wrong content here. Right, this is special GL. Normal,
Thank you.
special, normal. Right. Okay, the first point before we start learning accounts payable or accounts receivable is to understand the basic accounting entries, basic data flow. Once this is there, adding everything is very simple. You will not find it any difficulty in accounts payable, in accounts receivable, because you are good at the basic accounts payable, basic accounts receivable. Now, when we are talking about installment purchases or installment sales, there may be certain sales or there may be certain purchases when you make. Let's say you purchase something for 10,000 rupees and you will tell that I will make the payment in 4 installments. Are we going to give 4 invoices or only one invoice?
One invoice.
Invoice will be one, but payments will be four, correct?
Yes, sir.
Against one invoice, if you are going to receive 4 payments, you have to split your liability into 4. Agree?
Yes, sir.
You have to split your liability
Yes.
into 4. Now for this you have same thing, payment terms only, but in payment terms you have something called installment payment terms. When you create an installment payment term, here you are going to decide on what basis you are going to split the invoice. Let's say 30 days first payment will come, 60 days second payment will come, 30 days third payment will come, next 30 days another fourth payment will come. Accordingly, system is going to split your 10,000 divided by 4. Small things will not take more than 10-15 minutes to configure in the system. These are all small things. Whatever we have done so far, if you are good at it, and whatever we are going to learn going forward, everything is a bit and piece. Just an add-on, just a topping we are adding, and then we are understanding everything. It's not that you have to understand everything from the scratch to get the point, not required. Whatever we have done so far, if you are good at it, if you have configured 2 company codes at least, whatever we are going to discuss, you are nowhere going to feel it difficult. Clear? Because whatever the attributes, whatever the parameters that your company code is supposed to have, we have added everything. It's only that particular functionality you have to enable. Adding or enabling that particular functionality is a simple task, and this is how you are going to work when you are in a project. Right? It's not that you are going to create everything from the scratch. You will be adding, there will be existing setup. In that existing setup, you have to add some additional functionalities, or you have to fine tune the existing functionality. For that, the minor settings will have to be done, but you have to understand the impact of your settings. It's already working fine in the system, but you are adding additional functionality. What is going to happen with this? It's not like that, just like that we will go and do the configuration, we will tell the client to test it, this is completed. That is wrong. So you have to understand whether these settings will affect anywhere else. If yes, where these settings will affect, and you need to ensure that this effect will not be creating any problem. So a lot of things we will have to ensure when you're actually working in a project. It's not about just like that doing the configuration. So please remove that kind of mindset from thinking from your mindset. Okay, the way we configure while we learn, the way you configure when you're in a project is entirely different. There is no comparison at all. Clear? Getting my point right? Those who are working already will understand what I'm talking about. Even to do a small change, you will have to think twice before getting into the system, modifying the changes. So why we will do all these things is to ensure that your settings are not creating any problem. But when we are practicing, it's fine because nobody is going to pass any real-time entries in it. It is you who is going to pass the entries. And we are not finding any problem because we are not seeing it from the business point of view. We are not seeing it from the financials point of view. If you see it from the financial point of view, even when you're practicing, you will identify, you will observe lot of things. You will simply feel that no, this is wrong, this is not supposed to be like this is supposed to be like this. We are not able to decide that what is correct, what is wrong, whether what I'm doing is right or wrong, because we are not thinking from a business point of view, we are not thinking from a real-time perspective. Normally what everybody will do when they practice, they will just do the configuration, they will pass some entries, they will run a report, they will tell, okay, I understood how to configure this. But is this what that we are going to do when you are in a project, those who are working? Is this what you are going to do?
No, sir. It is completely different.
Right? It's completely different. So the way you're looking at the system, you have to see it from a business point of view, because end of the day, whatever you're doing is used by your client. So see it from the client side. Think from your client point of view, whether this will be okay or not okay. It's not about completing from our side. Now we will push this to the client side. I'll tell that this is pending from customer side or client side. User will have to check and confirm. This approach is followed, but only in support projects. In support project, what we will do, any issue that you get, you are going to keep it with the customer. You are going to push it. It's all about playing a game when you're in a support project. Somebody will send an issue, they will start sending reminders. Gentle reminder 1, we are awaiting for your response. What you are going to do, you are going to do something, we have made certain changes, please check and confirm if it is working fine. This is quite common in the support projects. Very common thing that you see when you are in a support project. Nobody will try to fix the problem. Majorly, everybody will try to push it to the other side. Pending from my side, I don't want to keep it. Pending from your side, you don't want to keep it. You will send an email, you will tell this is pending from the consultant. As a consultant, I will send an email, I will tell this is pending from the user. Quite common thing that you see when you are in a support project. All right. So far, whatever we discussed is clear, right? I want everybody to go through this, only the accounting entries part, so that in tomorrow's session, we will be talking about basic accounts payable configuration. We will configure accounts payable. We will create a vendor account. Similarly, accounts receivable, I am not going to configure. Accounts receivable, I want all of you to configure on your own, because it is exactly the opposite side of your accounts payable. If you know accounts payable, you must be able to create accounts receivable on your own. So that tells whether you understood accounts payable or not. Clear? What parameters we need, how we are going to configure, everything we will understand in tomorrow's session. And in the tomorrow's session, we are going to create accounts payable both in ECC and in S4HANA system. Okay, we will be creating only the vendor account in tomorrow's session. One vendor we will be creating in ECC. Once we create one vendor in ECC, we will get into S4HANA. We will create the same vendor with the same name in S4HANA, so that you will understand what are the changes from ECC to S4HANA when it comes to vendor accounts. In short, business partner. This is something that everybody will ask you in your interview. ECC to S4HANA changes with respect to vendors or customers. In short, business partner. Right from the configuration changes you will have to tell, because only in this BP config you will find changes. When you're on the business process, there will be no changes. The way you create invoice, the way you create vendor, everything remains as it is. Except minor changes, you will not find any difference. Clear? Alright then, let me stop this recording.